Yesterday, we set the tone for the International Blue Carbon and Wetlands Conference 2025 with a vibrant welcome to Santa Marta. We hope you've enjoyed your visit to Colombia so far. Yesterday, we were graced with a local cultural performance followed by warm greetings from our institutional partners, the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA, the Inter-American Development Bank, the University of the West Indies, and our hosts at INVEMAR. Dr. Stephen Crooks's keynote challenged us to bridge science, policy, and finance to unlock the full potential of blue carbon ecosystems. From Dr. Crooks's keynote address, which draws from the International Blue Carbon Scientific Working Group, whose impact has been felt from Cape Town, South Africa, to Costa Rica, to Indonesia, Santa Marta, Colombia, and many countries in between. Our first technical block then explored the ecosystem services of blue carbon habitats with presentations on mangrove recovery, anthropogenic impacts on the Caroni swamp, regional coastal ecosystem services, and the ecological value of seagrasses in carbon capture. We heard from Dr. Juan Felipe Lazarus, Dr. Rahana Juman, who I've had the distinct pleasure of saying that I shared an undergraduate degree with from the University of the West Indies, Dr. Hannah Morissette, and Dr. Diana Isabel Gomez. The afternoon focused on scientific innovations in blue carbon research, from LIDAR mapping and eDNA analysis to AI applications and national climate strategy integration, culminating in a panel discussion skillfully led by Hamish on emerging technologies evolving in this field. We closed day one with a sense of shared purpose, inspired by both the science and the collaborative spirit that underpins this gathering. Today, we move deeper into the human and economic dimensions of blue carbon. Our morning will focus on gender, community, and stakeholder inclusion, or GSI, highlighting how inclusive approaches strengthen conservation outcomes, elevate local voices, and ensure that benefits are equitably shared. In the afternoon, we'll turn to blue carbon financing opportunities and policy and governance, examining how innovative financing mechanisms, policy alignment, and governance structures translate science into lasting impact. We'll close with insights from our regional blue carbon MRV project community of practice, spotlighting practical lessons and pathways for scaling action across Latin America and the Caribbean. We're also truly excited about the cocktail ceremony and poster sessions tonight, which will give us a chance to strengthen and grow our contacts. We acknowledge that we are stronger together in preserving our wetlands and tackling the overarching issue of climate change. This is envisaged to be memorable, which allows our project's community of practice from an America and the Caribbean scope to interface with persons from around the world. As we begin day two, let's carry forward the momentum from yesterday, rooted in resilience, committed to collaborate in our mission to protect the ecosystems that protect us. So I thank you for your kind attention, and I look forward to your continued engagement. Bye-bye, everyone.
Muchas gracias a la doctora Tuwari.
Thank you very much,
Le recordamos
Dr.
que
Tuwari.
contamos con traducción simultánea. Si necesitan
Please remember we have simultaneous
este tipo de
interpretation.
apoyo,
If you
por favor, diríjanse a
need the
nuestro
service,
personal
please
para que
address
nos ayuden
our
al respecto.
event staff.
Ahora pasaremos al primer bloque temático del día,
Now
que se
moving
centra en la dimensión
onto
humana
the
de la
next
acción climática,
thematic
la
introduction,
voz comunitaria, la equidad de género y la inclusión
which focuses on
de
the
los
human
actores
dimension of
clave.
climate action,
Porque
community
sin
voice,
las
gender equity, and
personas,
inclusion
la
of key
ciencia
actors,
fracasa.
because without people, science
Nuestra primera
fails.
ponente del día
Our first
es la
speaker is
profesora
Professor
Paulette
Paulette Bynoe
de la Universidad de
from the
Guyana.
University of Guyana.
La profesora
Professor
Bynoe
Bynoe
es una
is an
especialista en
environmental
mental
specialist
con formación
with
interdisciplinaria cuyo
an
trabajo abarca la
interdisciplinary
gestión
background
comunitaria del
whose work
riesgo de
encompasses
desastres,
community-based
la
disaster risk
educación
management,
ambiental y la resiliencia
environmental education,
climática.
and climate
Tiene un
resilience.
doctorado
She
en
holds a PhD
geografía,
in
una
geography,
maestría
a
en
master's
educación
degree
ambiental
in
y una
environmental education,
licenciatura
and a
en
bachelor's
geografía.
degree in geography.
En
In
2015 recibió la
2015, she
medalla
received
Flecha
the
Dorada
Golden
al
Arrow of
Mérito
Merit
del
medal
presidente de
from the
Guyana
President of Guyana
por su
for her
contribución a la
contribution
política
to
pública
public
y la
policy
educación
and
en gestión de
education
recursos
in
naturales.
natural resource
Actualmente
management.
forma
She
parte del
currently
Consejo
serves
Nacional
on the
para el Agua
National
de
Water
Guyana,
Council of Guyana,
preside la Alianza
chairs
Global
the
por el
Global
Agua
Water
Caribe
Partnership
y es
Caribbean,
parte del
and
Comité
he is a member
Ejecutivo del
of the
Mecanismo
Executive
Internacional de
Committee
Varsovia.
of a Warsaw International Mechanism.
Su ponencia se titula
Her
Gobernanza
presentation is
Inclusiva en
entitled Inclusive
Proyectos de
Governance in
Carbonación
Blue
en el
Carbon
Caribe,
Projects in
la
the Caribbean, the
importancia del
importance
género,
of
la
gender,
comunidad y la
community,
participación de los
and
territorios.
stakeholder participation.
La recibimos con una
Let's
cordial bienvenida.
welcome her with a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And let me say a very good morning to my esteemed colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I want to express gratitude to the sponsors and the organizers of this very important conference, because we know that when we're looking at coastal ecosystems, very, very critical. And in many of our countries, especially in the Caribbean and in mainland of South America, we have the majority of the population living on the coast. So for us to focus on the human aspect, the economic aspect, I think that's really great. Because sometimes, we can forget about the fact that these ecosystems do not occur in a social vacuum. And if we can agree to that, I think it's a good way to start. So in the next few minutes, I want to focus on inclusive governance in blue carbon projects in the Caribbean, the importance of gender, community, and stakeholder engagement. I'll give an introduction, try to persuade you as to why inclusive governance matters, because there are some people who feel that, and I hope that no one in here feels that way, that once we get the science right, forget about the people. And IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they have learned a lesson that the science could be correct. But when you're talking about building resilience, and even when you're talking about climate mitigation, you really need to consider social aspects. And in the real world, the physical is not separated from the human, or the natural is not separated from the human. But we try to compartmentalize the knowledge, especially when we're using monodisciplinary lens. So I want to really talk about why the inclusive governance matters, gender considerations in blue carbon projects, community engagement, stakeholder engagement, some of the challenges, or if you want to say lessons learned, and just some recommendations. So yesterday we would have already been persuaded that blue carbon ecosystems are vital carbon sinks, and they act as natural defenses against coastal erosion and storm surges. There are other uses of these very important ecological systems. I want to stress the point that technical solutions are necessary. So I'm not saying that we should ignore the scientific aspect, or we should ignore the technical aspect, but sometimes we can become so technocentric that we're forgetting that technology or the technical approach is necessary but insufficient. Therefore, one can argue that inclusive governance is vital to equitable and sustainable blue carbon initiatives. If we're going to have meaningful engagement, then we can aim to enhance environmental and social outcomes in blue carbon projects in the Caribbean. So I already stated that coastal wetlands, when we're talking about the different ecosystems on our coast, that they're not void of human beings. They do not exist in a social vacuum. And if we were to take Guyana's case, because I'm from Guyana and I really want to persuade you to consider the fact that there is always that human ecosystem interaction. The question is, how is this interaction manifested? First, we have in Guyana approximately 90% of the population living on the low coastal plain. And that area, that geographical area, includes extensive wetland areas. Then, a number of households on the coast have their livelihoods from these coastal ecosystems. The infrastructure very often is modified for drainage, for irrigation, and flood control through what the Dutch has left with us, the cokers, the sluice gates. We also have the seawalls and the canals. Then we have the pressures, anthropogenic activities that cause pressures to these coastal ecosystems. You have urban expansion, for example, in our capital city, Georgetown. You also have agricultural activities. You have clay and sand mining, and they've all led to the alteration of habitats and erosion. But apart from that, there is also the positive side, because you've got communities involved in conservation and restoration of these ecosystems. For example, you can find online the Guyana Mangrove Restoration Project and community ecotourism in many areas on the coast. So why does inclusive governance matter? Why should we ensure that in rolling out a project that we really showcase the importance, the core principle, the core value of what we call inclusivity? First, when we include women, men, indigenous people, people who are marginalized, the local communities, we can build local ownership and trust. And when we're talking about sustainability, which is long-term, you cannot have sustainability without local ownership. Because once the local people feel as if it's a project that is given to them, that they're passive recipients of an intervention, you cannot call that sustainable. And very often when we look at sustainability, we are only focusing on the ecological aspect of sustainability, but the social and the economic are equally important. Inclusive governance would enhance ecological outcomes because you have diverse perspectives that can lead to better strategies. It protects the rights and the livelihoods of people. It reduces conflict. A lot of times, projects can be delayed because there is social conflict. Why is there social conflict? Maybe we did not even bother to share the information with the local people, and that's the least you can do when we consider the participation ladder. The least we can do, not hide the information from the people. And so when they don't know, they assume. When they don't know, they can think of wrong things, and that can lead to conflicts. And conflicts are costly, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of money. It would ensure equitable benefit sharing particularly if we're looking at carbon credits. The proceeds must be shared with the local people. It strengthens compliance and monitoring. Community involvement is important. They're the foot soldiers. Many times the institutions do not have the capacity to monitor every part of the area. So if you have the local people involved and they're persuaded that it's beneficial for them to protect the resources, then indeed we can have better compliance and monitoring. And of course, of late we've been talking about climate justice. It aligns blue carbon initiatives with principles of fairness, human rights, and sustainable development. So why gender considerations? So when we talk about gender, we're not only talking about women. A lot of times why we focus on women is because women sometimes do not have the same equal access to the decision-making process. So when we consider the gendered aspect of the blue carbon projects in our countries, we must understand the different roles, the roles that the men will play and the roles that women will play. Their knowledge systems. It would guarantee equitable access to benefits. It would reduce the climate change and disaster vulnerability because we understand that vulnerability is not homogeneous. When we think of vulnerability, we think of exposure. We think of sensitivity, which would be a reflection of socioeconomic conditions. Then we talk about capacity. A lot of times when we have training workshops, maybe the room is full of men and few women because we think that the men are the ones who should be involved in these blue carbon projects, but the women have a right to be there. Then it also allows us to comply with global frameworks. We can look at the Paris Agreement, we can look at Sustainable Development Goal number 5, we can also look at the UNFCCC Gender Action Plan. The UNFCCC is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It will also harness leadership potential because women around the world are important environmental stewards, and they will help to enhance the local buy-in of the project that will ensure its success. It will improve monitoring and safeguard compliance. So why community engagement? As I said before, these carbon projects do not exist in social vacuums. So you've got communities, whether they're living adjacent to the project areas or whether they're living inside of the project areas. We have to engage them. And this engagement must transcend consultation. At home and even at university, I tell my students that local communities sometimes suffer from what I call consultation fatigue. Because we go there with an agenda and we want to speak all the time. It's not dialogic. So the community members, they are just passive listeners, passive recipients of what we're talking about. And very often we find that it's just for us to tick a box so that the consultation becomes tokenism. It's not meaningful. All we want to say is that we consulted. Let us understand the true meaning of engagement, where we allow community, local people to be involved to the extent that the process can really demonstrate co-design and co-management. Collaborative management in natural resources is key all over the world. It also will foster local ownership As I said, local ownership is critical to sustainability, and it would leverage rich knowledge systems, because we have to be able to twin local knowledge with scientific knowledge. And when we go into the area, based on my own training at the University of Sussex, when you go into a local area, don't behave as if you're such an expert. Pass the baton to the local people. Empower the local people to tell you how they use this particular ecological system. What are the risks involved? What are the challenges? How can they play a part? But you see, when we go in there with our academic hats and our different positions, if you're outside of academia, and we behave like the experts, sometimes that would cause the people to shy away from the process of engagement, and that is not good. So we talked about community engagement. Now we're talking about stakeholder, because stakeholder would be beyond community members. And within our own countries, we can think of different stakeholders: the fishers, indigenous groups. We can think of local government, non-governmental organizations such as World Wildlife Fund, Conservation International. Let us not forget the private sector, academia, research institutes, and regional organizations. So we have to engage different stakeholders early. Stakeholder engagement, colleagues, should not be an afterthought. Oh, you know, I forgot, I did not engage them. But however, let me just share the information. How can we do that? So we have to really engage them, not as tokenism, but understanding the principle of inclusivity, getting them involved early so that we clearly understand the diverse needs. And those diverse needs in the local context would be reflected in the way we design the project. So the perspectives, the effectiveness of the project, all of those issues would be positive if we would only engage stakeholders. But we have challenges, or if you want to say lessons learned. Despite our best intentions in our different countries, many projects, and I'm sure you can share some stories, many projects still struggle with tokenistic participation. We only want to tick the box, maybe because it's a conditionality for us to get the funding. But we really don't want the people involved. Then, if we look at our institutional architecture, maybe there is no democratic governance, and we have a very centralized decision-making. So decisions are made at the top. You know, we call it top-down, and it's passed on to the community. Then we have institutional barriers. Maybe in your country, in my country, you have institutions with overlapping functions, a lot of duplication, a lot of fragmentation. And that in itself can be problematic, because when institution A says something, B says something else. The local people are confused. Who should we listen to? Weak legal recognition of the rights of indigenous people, marginalized groups. It starts with the legislation. So if we have weak legal recognition of rights, then maybe we feel that there is no need to include communities, women, marginalized people. Or it could be that we have inadequate stakeholder engagement frameworks. If in your country, and if in my country, We practice environmental impact assessment, and social impact assessment is a critical component. Then we will understand the importance of social safeguards. And I know that the IDB is big on that, the social safeguards. But there could be another issue, the genuine lack of capacity and funding for community or gender outreach. Some professionals will argue that when you want to involve stakeholders, particularly local communities, you have to have time and money. And many times the issue is that we don't have sufficient funds. Maybe because the technical aspect uses up most of the funds, and we feel happy. And then there is nothing for the people. So we really have to rethink. It's a fundamental paradigm shift in the way we manage these projects. But you can have successful projects that utilize tools such as your stakeholder mapping, your gender analysis, and many of us would have been trained in participatory planning methods. And to ensure that engagement is ongoing, it's not a one-time activity for us to tick the box. So what are my recommendations? We have to have a legal mandate that would uphold inclusivity, inclusive decision-making processes that will involve local communities, indigenous people, women, youth, and others. If we're dealing with indigenous people, as in the context of Region 1 in Guyana, then we have to ensure FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent. It's a core requirement. We have to establish multi-stakeholder governance bodies at different levels. Ensure that we engage stakeholders throughout the project cycle. Build the capacity of women and youth to participate effectively. Our benefit sharing framework must be transparent and must be co-designed with the stakeholders. And of course, to incorporate traditional and local knowledge. So to conclude, I would say that inclusive governance is vital, it's essential, it is necessary if we want long-term success and legitimacy of blue carbon projects in our region. Giving prominence to the voices of women, indigenous peoples, and local communities will foster equity, resilience, and justice. It's something that we owe to the people. And to my Caribbean colleagues, and maybe by extension, Latin America and the Caribbean, may I say to all of us that we must lead the world by placing social inclusion at the core of our blue economy, ensuring equitable participation and benefits for everyone. For those who might want to take some, I'm an academic, so I must give you bibliography. And these are some very critical publications. And just to say thanks for listening. Are there any questions? Thank you. Yes. Any questions, or I've made it so simple that, but thank you very much. Okay. Do I need translation?
Yes. Sí. Buenos días.
Good morning. What strategies were useful? What strategies did work in some of those processes for those stakeholders
que estuviesen en sintonía con
to
los
be
fines.
in sync.
Pudiese compartir, por favor.
Anything you can share?
Thank you so much for that question. I'm just going to draw from my experience. I was the leader of a project that was funded by the Caribbean Development Bank, was on coastal resilience in Guyana, and the component was referred to as community awareness and education program. So the first thing that we did, had a team of different specialists, geomorphologists, GIS specialists, social inclusion, well, if you want to say stakeholder engagement specialists, a number of persons. So the first thing we did is have a sort of field reconnaissance, a walk through the area, the affected area, or the area that we wanted to promote the conservation, the protection, so that we understand. We're not reading from the book. We're going into the field. This is a very important aspect for officials. Get your feet dirty. Go into the field. I always warn against writing something in some air-conditioned office, and you really don't know what you're talking about. So we went into the field. After that, we decided to hold focus group sessions in our neighborhood democratic councils. This is at a lower level, okay, because several communities belong to a particular NDC. And in those focus group meetings, we allow the women, the men, and the youth to talk about the issues. We also did a social survey of households because we wanted to know how they interact with the mangrove. Because the mangrove is the first sea defense, natural sea defense, protecting us for free. And there was this, for some households, they had a perception that what they call bush, it's blocking their view of the sea, and so they want to clear it, not knowing the importance. So when we, and then also we understood from the social survey and from the focus group meetings that the local interaction with the ecosystem was different based on the community and based on their perception and their knowledge and so on. We then moved to another stage in the project, and we designed the public awareness and education program. And for this, we use a diversity of, if you want to say, educational materials. So we had newspaper articles, a series of those, what mangroves we have in Guyana, why they're important, what are the threats, how you can protect the mangroves, and so on. We also did radio programs, television programs. But when we developed the scripts for those programs, we took them to the local people to pilot, to test them. So it was not just creating the materials, but making them, just tailoring them in a way that they can meet the level of the people. Because this is important. We talked about education and awareness yesterday. Not everybody can do education and awareness. You can have a doctorate, but you're no good at education and awareness to local people. So that you really need to understand what are the characteristics of the people. Are they part of the problem? Should they be part of the solution? And how could they play a part? What is the gap in the knowledge? And you build on that. So that the program that you design should be well informed. And nothing can be well informed if you do not have baseline data. I am saddened in the region. I've spoken about this in several countries, the last one being in Jamaica. When we run programs and we design educational materials, but we have no baseline, we assume that we know what the people need to know. We don't run any CAP study, knowledge, awareness, and practice, knowledge, attitude, and practice. So it's really a process. You have to sit down and to work out all the steps. And I can guarantee that you will find that your project will be successful. So thank you for that question.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. And as you may know, I think inclusive governance, it's clear, I understand, but still it's difficult to implement. So I am wondering if you have an example where all has been implemented in order to have step forwards in achieving the goal we are trying to have here on the regional level as it comes to blue carbon. What needs to be done to be able to coordinate among ourselves nationally, but also regionally in order to make progress in what we are aiming for. So I would like to know your perspectives on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. So the first, I think it has to start from an understanding, a collective understanding that coastal ecological systems do not occur in a social vacuum. This is very important because psychologically, the way we think would really affect what we do. And I see this manifested in several units, several institutions that deal with natural resource management. So that's the first principle. It's a core value of understanding that local people have a stake. They have an interest. Why do they have an interest? Well, they have an interest because, first of all, they interact with the resource for different reasons, whether it be livelihoods, all right? Whether it just be a form of protection from the storm surges, but we understand that interaction. Then, you can look at your own policy and your legislation. Does either of the two promote participatory democracy? Because if you see, when we're dealing with the environment, and I'm just putting on my hat here as a professor, when we're dealing with the environment, a lot of the root causes are outside of that. We have to start questioning our own governance systems. So if in a country you do not have democratic governance, it would be difficult for you to argue that involving stakeholders, local communities, and others is vital because you're already in a state in which it is centralized bureaucratic decision-making. And for you to deal with that, you would have to change the legislation. But if you are living in a society that promotes democratic governance and understands the principle of inclusivity, then the next question is, how can I involve the local people? What kinds of tools have been used and proven to be successful? So, in many countries, as I said, you have consultation. All I'm saying to us today, let consultation not be tokenism, that you can just tick a box. But when you consult, ensure to get the people to participate in the forum, in the consultation, that you share the information with them before. If you want people to really participate, why would you wait until the time of the workshop? Then one of the technical officers would do a PowerPoint. Why? This is what we do. And it is not effective. But if we first ensure that the local people, the different stakeholders understand the project, they have time to think about it, and then we have true consultation. We allow them to share their concerns, to share how they interact with the resource. We tell them about the project, the different steps in the project. How can they help? How can they be involved? Everything must be transparent. So what I'm saying is that what we do is a reflection of the very institutions that we have. And so when it comes to community-based natural resource management, it's almost a paradigm shift of what we're accustomed to with the undemocratic governance actions that are taken because we go around, experts know best. It doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. When you empower the local people and you make them feel that they have a stake, they themselves will want to help to protect the resource because they understand the way that they interact with it. It's like protected area system. You know, we go about establishing that without any consultation with the people. Well, the forest would not have been there if the people were not protecting it, so why leave them out? We have to ask some hard questions. So we have to think outside of the box and to ensure that we have this paradigm shift in how we do things. And all I'm asking us to do today is to understand that the principle of inclusivity is vital to the success of any blue carbon project. You cannot prove me wrong. Thank you. Let's see another.
Muy buenos días, excelente presentación.
Hey, good morning. Wonderful presentation. It was very inspiring. So from your experience, how could we measure this social inclusion?
Okay. So as you know, when we're dealing with social variables, it's not quantitative as it's qualitative. And so when you decide to include persons, you really need to look at what are they, you need to itemize the outcomes, not the outputs, but the outcomes, right? Do you see over time, and this is where you'll have to do trend analysis, because it's not short term, it's long term. Over time, have you seen, have you recognized, have you observed an increase in the number of local people who are, for example, monitoring what's happening? Do you see any manifestation of the inclusion of some recommendation of the local people included in the design of the project? So you've got to really, at the beginning, identify some specific things that you're going to look for over time. But of course, because it's a paradigm shift from the norm, it's going to take time. So one of the things you can also do is to see how one can tweak the legislation, it will take time as well, to ensure that no project will go forward without the inclusion of the local people. So it's really identifying specific things that you want to see happening as outcomes, and then to observe the trend, because that's the only way you would know. And of course, to talk to the people, so that you can have a before and after scenario, and the before and after scenario will allow you to measure change. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a la
Okay,
profesora
thank
Bynoe.
you very much to
De verdad soy
Dr.
muy
Ryan. I think that we had
preguntas
multiple questions that were very interesting. We remind you that you can also send the questions that you have through the Whova app, and also to the people that are now in Zoom, you can send your questions through the Whova app so they can be answered in a different time on these sessions. Up next, we're going to hear from Mark Beeston from Conservation International. Mr. Benson is a technical director of Blue Carbon Ecosystem and an intersectional ecologist specialized in coastal and tropical freshwater vegetated ecosystems. He supports several global initiatives, including Mangrove Breakthrough, the Global Mangrove Alliance, and the High Quality Blue Carbon Practice Guide. His presentation is titled Integrating Gender, Community, and Stakeholder Participation in Blue Carbon Projects, 4 years on. Let's welcome Mr. Benson with a warm round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to say let's move that over there. I'm a bit too tall for this. Just want to say your presentation was brilliant, and I really hope I can come close to just a fraction of your energy. So thank you. I'm Mark Beeston. I'm Technical Director for Conservation International's Global Blue Carbon Programme. And what I want to share today is how we are working to drive greater awareness of the importance of gender, community, and stakeholder engagement in blue carbon projects. And to be clear, when I say blue carbon projects, I mean any conservation, restoration, or management project in a blue carbon ecosystem, not just those which produce blue carbon credits. Before we dive in, though, I'd like everyone to pause for a moment and think about a community that you have worked with personally, and hold a picture of them in your head for a moment. You might be thinking about a group of people within that community, whether it's a family, a leader, a particular group that you were close to. And then just think how many different pictures of what the word community means to each of us are in all of our heads right now. And probably not with this audience, but certainly in some of the groups I talk to, people forget about that difference and make the mistake of talking about community as if they are all one and the same. So when we're talking about community today, let's just be mindful to remember all those different pictures and what community looks like to everyone else, how diverse these communities are. So Dr. Steve Crooks mentioned yesterday morning in his keynote, there is only one blue carbon project with the additional Vera CCB certification covering community and biodiversity work. That one project is Vida Mangla right here in Colombia, and my colleague Amy Schmidt will be talking later about the lessons learned from the work INVEMAR, CI and our partners have done together on that project. My job today is to talk about some of the big picture stuff, and I hope you find it interesting. So my colleague Mark Huxham likes to define mangroves and other blue carbon habitats as not just ecological, but socio-ecological systems, recognizing that in many countries there are clear and deep links between humans and blue carbon ecosystems. So if you focus on the ecology of the system without taking into account the relationships between people and how they interact with it, then you only have part of the information and perspective you need to effectively manage, conserve, or restore blue carbon ecosystems for the long term. And even just on a practical level of designing a restoration project, there might be local knowledge built up over years which can inform your project design particularly around site history, how it's changed, what might have caused that, if people use the site, what they use it for, how intensively they use it. And this kind of information can really lead you to identifying the drivers of loss or damage that you need to address for a project to be successful. And similarly, taking the time to understand the needs and expectations of community members or any other stakeholders allows you to design a project that works for people as well as for nature. And that support, I think we all know, is critical. And there are some good peer-reviewed publications that really provide an evidence base for this. Going back 11 years ago, focused on blue carbon crediting, or if you go right back to my younger days, when we still used the term coastal vegetated ecosystems, there are even more papers already talking about the importance of inclusive design and management. There we go. Needs a little flourish. Something which is sometimes very well understood at project level, but perhaps not yet spoken about enough or written about enough, is that how humans experience and interact with blue carbon ecosystems can really differ according to gender. And I say sometimes well understood because what I see around me in a lot of projects is that when designing community outreach, engagement, and of course FPIC, there is often a lot of care taken to ensure that at the minimum a gender-balanced approach to consultation is employed. And in places where traditional gender roles might prioritise the voices of usually men over others, there may be additional efforts made to reach women in the community. And that's great. But still only a few weeks ago, I was talking to projects where women's participation was minimal, as when consultations were carried out, the women were busy with childcare, food collection and preparation. And the team on the ground raised this, but there was no budget to rectify the problem because gender hadn't been considered in advance. And that was not a CI project, to be super clear. So we need to think about perhaps more of us, especially those of us who are already doing a good job at ensuring men, women and everyone are properly represented. We need to think about how good we are at actually reporting on it. What formal planning have we done? What documentation have we produced? Where we might need dedicated team members with specialised skill sets, and then what all this costs. Because the more we talk about gender within community work, and the more we include it in our donor reporting, in our media outreach, then the more we can normalise building gender-inclusive approaches into community engagement and safeguarding, and then we can start, it becomes accepted as normalised practice. And a shameless plug, there is a paper led by CI and the International Blue Carbon Institute. It was almost released in time for this meeting, but will just be a few weeks away. And the QR code goes to some guidance from the forest carbon credit space. It's not one of mine, I just quite like this one. It's one of a few good resources out there, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to share it. So some of the challenges we've been working on over the last 4 years. There's plenty of community engagement tools out there, and they are improving with each iteration. We need to know how to choose the right one for each social context. But we do have tools. The challenge we hear repeatedly, and to echo my colleague here, unsurprisingly, doing this really well takes time, it takes expertise, and it can cost a lot. And while a lot of traditional funding sources like development banks, large NGOs, and more experienced philanthropic funds understand this, since the explosion of interest in the term blue carbon, we've seen a lot of newer groups enter this space, including corporate funding and also commercial startups who may be looking for a return on investment within a certain time frame. And then while there's plenty of guidance out there, it may not always be accessible or easy to find. Sometimes it's only in one language. Sometimes the training or expertise to use it in practice is missing. And to me, this does seem to be improving. I think there's been a global team effort with all of us, and it feels like we're moving in the right direction at least. It's just slow, and there is still a huge amount to be done. So let's jump to 2021, 4 years ago. That's gone terrifyingly fast. The early days of the blue carbon hype, for want of a better word, running up to this point were a little wild, with a disproportionate focus on carbon crediting, a lot of misinformation, a lot of misunderstanding of how that works, and some of that still persists today. And perhaps only a few trusted voices, I can't help but look at Steve when I say that, who brought some real professionalism and expertise to the space. We also suffered from a lot of assumptions that terrestrial restoration methods would work just as well in mangroves and seagrass. And there was a real lack of awareness with this hyper-focus on carbon of the socio-ecological factors that we touched on earlier, those links between diverse communities and how they relate to and interact with blue carbon ecosystems. So by the time we get to 2021, there's a lot of warning bells happening here. Especially around not wanting to see some of the negative social impacts of a few of the early forest carbon or REDD+ projects. We didn't want to see that repeated in the blue carbon space, and we wanted to acknowledge and address that risk early on. So out of a lot of discussion between corporates and NGOs emerging at this time around the concept of high-quality projects and high-quality carbon credits, partially facilitated and amplified by the World Economic Forum and an expert working group, this really represented an opportunity to raise awareness of the need for proper, meaningful community and stakeholder engagement in addition to de-risking the technical and ecological parts of project design. A year later, 2022, and the high-quality blue carbon principles and guidance were released at COP in Sharm el-Sheikh. This work draws on ethical practices from terrestrial carbon projects, from leading blue carbon experts, and from stakeholder engagement led by Meridian and the Forum. And there's definitely some people in the audience here who were part of that process. And this work produced 5 high-quality principles: safeguarding nature, empowering people, operating according to the local context, employing the best science, and to work with funders who operate with high integrity themselves. And why principles and not a set of best practices? Well, best practices are improved on and change. For example, we're shifting from diameter at breast height to LiDAR and terrestrial lasers. But principles guide how we act, and how we act into the future, and so are relevant for longer. The next year, 2023, and the Global Mangrove Alliance released their best practice guidelines for mangrove restoration. And this includes, again, not just ecological approaches to restoration, but also touches and elements of project design and management. And in here, we really saw a chance to advocate further for the need for projects to also adopt best practices in how they work with people, and to integrate community needs, goals, knowledge, and critically leadership into project design. And in recognition of the fact that carbon finance is only suited to some projects and not all, this manual introduces a 6th principle around designing projects for long-term sustainability. And there's also a module on blue carbon in this, which includes an overview of the crediting process. And this is all free and easy to download. It's available in English, French, Portuguese, Bahasa, and Mandarin. Unfortunately, the Spanish version we had to recall for the moment, as the translator liked to use the word planting in place of restoration, and once we caught that, we had to remove it to redo it. Because that's somewhat embarrassing. Not ideal. At the end of 2023, those high-quality principles had been around for a year now. When they were released, organisations were asked to commit to follow the principles as early adopters and then provide feedback on their experience. And that feedback did surface a few needs. Firstly, organisations trying to adopt the principles asked for case studies of high-quality projects. Okay. And they wanted to know where they could find free and open access resources to support integration of technical and social best practice into their work. Okay, that's fine too. But the next part is where it got challenging. As the concept of high quality by this point had gained traction and become quite mainstream, there are now many fancy websites all saying high quality credits, high quality this, high quality that. And so a lot of our early adopters expressed a need to be able to communicate effectively the quality of their work to financiers so they could justify why their operational costs may be comparatively high, or why their project timelines may be longer as they build relationships with community stakeholders, or for credit suppliers to be able to justify the price it costs to produce each credit when you do things properly. Another year, the mangrove breakthrough. One of the most significant adoptions of the high quality blue principles and the bonus 6 principle from the restoration guidelines. To recap quickly, if you haven't heard of this, the mangrove breakthrough brings together the Mangrove Alliance for Climate, the Global Mangrove Alliance, all of our members, more than 50 countries representing the vast majority of mangrove area in the world, around shared goals to halt avoidable mangrove loss, to restore half of the available restorable area, and to double the area under protection. And this is tied into a global fundraising initiative for that purpose. And as this gains momentum, we too have a critical need to be able to identify and support high quality projects. So we need something to help us navigate the risk inherent to working at this kind of scale with potentially hundreds of projects at once. So right at the end of 2024, we published the prototype High Quality Blue Carbon Practitioner's Guide. It's a bit of a mouthful, but central to this guide is a self-assessment framework for projects to track their alignment with the high quality blue carbon principles as their project develops over time. And I say prototype, as instead of having a draft, sharing it between selected experts backwards and forwards and spending a year revising it and improving it, we made a deliberate choice to release this into the world as a version 1, just so we could see what the reaction would be, what feedback we got, and decide if this was something that was useful and that we should continue with. And critically, by throwing it out into the world, we recognised the need to go beyond our usual circles of collaborators and bring in fresh perspectives if we want this to actually work. So essentially, we just published my first draft to see what would happen. And that's scary. So what we needed was something that could help us bridge this communication gap between our world of communities and ecology and LIDAR and the worlds of finance and investment and philanthropy. So ideally, it needed to be something visual. And luckily, there is an existing framework we could use for this. The Society for Ecological Restoration uses a customizable wheel tool to track project progress against key indicators and to support decision-making as you work through it. And key is it presents complex data in a simple visual output. And so we adapted that wheel to show how projects are using holistic best practices and immeasurably high quality. This is what that tool looks like. You can see we have them already for tracking ecosystem recovery, for social benefits, and there's even one specifically for mangroves. An increasing number of ecologists are already familiar with how to use these. And I love these things because all you do is, as you complete each key performance indicator or hit each project milestone, you just colour in a bit of the wheel. And the more you colour in, the better you're doing. So this takes complex information and it just presents it in a way that can be understood and interpreted without needing a socioecology or biogeochemistry degree. So we can hand this to a funder and they don't need to know about the ecosystem, they can just see progress visually in front of them. Don't worry about reading this. This is just to show you how the tool works. To make this easier, for my sins, I built a matrix of a few hundred project KPIs drawn from projects in Kenya, from Colombia, from the GCF frameworks, from World Bank frameworks, all over the place, pulled them all together into this multiple choice framework that lists different project activities that you may or may not have done at different points in your project development. And so you run through this sheet, you choose the statements that match your work closest. At the end of the sheet, you click a button and it produces a colour wheel tool for you. Obviously, creating something simple is incredibly complicated. But now this has been thoroughly tested in the real world, we're already working on a version 2. including an online version with a really nice, shiny, easy-to-use user interface instead of a clunky old spreadsheet. So how it fits together, the progress wheel and the practitioner's guide are linked. The different sections of the guide are deliberately numbered to match each section of the wheel. So if you're underperforming in one area, you can open the guide to the corresponding text which explores each principle, and at the end of each section lists in total between 60 and 70 different resources to help project managers find what they need to design their project in better ways. Because most of these resources are already out there and they're freely available, you just need to know which ones are worth looking at and where to find them. So if you look at this example, you can see some sections of projects made exceptional progress, and others they're barely off the ground. And to be clear, as you progress from the center towards the outside of the circle, the minimum definition of a high quality project is at 3. So this also allows lots of space for projects which are really exceeding those minimum needs. Now there's some good third-party assessment services for credit quality, but what we needed was something that's accessible, that doesn't have additional cost attached to it, and which anyone working with a project can use as often as they want to plan, to report, to monitor. And one thing I mentioned is we wanted to talk about something that shows projects over time. So we recommend that projects use this tool. The first time they use it, fill in the wheel about 3 times. It really doesn't take very long. You could do all of this in a day with a really long lunch break and an afternoon nap thrown in as well. For this example, on your left is where you might be at the end of year 1. You've just started figuring out your project. The main focus has been on getting to know the community around the project site. In the center, year 2, present day in this case. And there's visible progress, visible change. And then by looking at the indicators, thank you, for a high quality project, we can plan what we need to do to achieve more high quality definitions and exceed in a couple of them by year 5. And we need to explore this further, but in aiming to track alignment with high quality, we've kind of accidentally created a project design blueprint linked to a ton of supporting manuals and resources. So that's kind of cool. In addition to being able to see your progress, this is a really nice visual story if you're talking to a financer or a funder. And if you're someone who's put out an RFP and you're receiving project funding applications, for example, if you've got 150 of those, you can just send this tool out to those that you're interested in and ask them to fill it out. So now you have a standardized and comparable metric so you can understand the state of development of projects they might need training or support. And because this projected change from year 2 to 5 in this example is based on planning which additional KPIs they want to achieve in that time, it can be used as a basis for laying out some of those project deliverables, and some of the funding conversation and costing can be attached to that. Come on. Over that way, apparently. I was going to run through one of the multiple choice lines, deliberately addressing community engagement in particular, as that's been the overriding theme for this talk. But I am pretty certain that you cannot read that from over there. It is one of the main themes of the framework. It does need some work. Remember, this is a first draft. But we're going to skip this for today, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about it later. That was accidental, look at that, without even pressing it. So after 4 years, here we are in 2025. We've trialled the tool with a diverse mix of projects, some issuing credits for years, some newly started, some not involved with crediting at all. And honestly, to my surprise, the feedback has been mostly positive. One comment from a project based in an African country was that using this tool gave them confidence that they were moving in the right direction because it lined up with what they were doing with their experience in getting started and planning. We're also trialing this visual output of the wheel in marketing credits. So we're actually sending this to potential credit buyers and saying, look, when we're asking for X amount per credit, we can justify why this is high quality and why we can ask this price because we can show you that we've done all these things. And finally, we're embedding this into a global request for projects, which is coming up later this year. The prototype is still open for feedback until the end of this month. If you have opinions, and I'm sure some people definitely have opinions, I would love to hear them. There's an email in the front of the guide. You can get me through the conference app. And if you have favourite tools and resources that might be helpful, please do share them, because I can just add them to this. Just note that all resources linked from this need to be free, open access, and not behind a paywall or a membership login to be included. And that is 4 years of being on a bit of a mission to integrate community engagement and safeguarding and gender best practice and technical best practice and pretty much everything else we could think of related to project development into a working definition of high quality blue carbon projects in a way which is hopefully useful for project managers for monitoring and reporting, and which can hopefully facilitate communication between our worlds of communities and carbon models and the banks, corporations and philanthropies who want to support our work. Speaking of which, thank you to UKID and DEFRA, Aura and the World Economic Forum for your support. Thank you all for listening. I hope you found it interesting, and I genuinely hope that what we've created here is something that is useful to you all. Thank you. And I can take a couple of questions, I think. One question. Or we can chat about it afterwards. That's just as good. Yep, somebody at the back.
Hola, gracias por tu presentación.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I have two questions. The first one is if in that test is also a different kind of economical valuation for blue carbon compared to earth carbon to be able to have access to these carbon markets. And the other one is because yesterday and today we'd heard that in Colombia there is just one project that is certified, is Vida Manglar, you know about it. And I would love to know, like from your study and knowledge, how do you think that we can maybe close these gaps for all the projects to be able to have easier access to these certifications? Thank you.
Good questions, thanks. Easier access to certification. There's a lot to that to unpack in a couple of minutes. I think key to it is that at this point we know what we're doing. The tricky bit is there's often a bit of a disconnect between what we're doing with individual projects and the size of those projects and how many credits they're going to produce and the time they take to do properly. And still, with some of the expectations of where funding is coming from to get moving, we're increasingly being told, well, what we want is 100,000 hectares and we want something that has a ticket price of $1 million or a couple of million. And when you come to some of the potential investors and you're like, well, we've got handfuls of projects which are fantastic, which have, you know, really good impact and benefits to all the people that are involved with them, they get glossed over because they're not big enough. And that disconnect is still there, and it's weird. There's only so many river deltas of a certain size in the world, and that simple geographical fact seems to be eluding some players at the moment. So it'll fix itself soon, but that's probably one of the biggest things at the moment. Everyone talks about scaling up and thinks about bigger projects and doesn't talk about scaling up and think of how we build groups of more small projects together. Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things. I have a whole list I could reel off, but I'm not going to subject you to that. We can chat later. I'll tell you for that. And your first question was about Vida Manglar, but I missed it on the translation, so I might ask you to repeat it really quickly, if that's okay. Be quick.
Sí, la pregunta
Yeah, the first question was if we need to do an economic revaluation of blue carbon compared to what's called air carbon or other kinds of carbon to be able to access the voluntary markets?
Oh yeah, the valuation between forestry credits and blue carbon credits. If we go back way before 2021, the first couple of projects that came about in the blue carbon space, they were funded by philanthropy and they were led by academics who wanted to see if this process actually worked in the blue space. And they were very focused on achieving, working with the communities they've been working with for years and actually getting something working for them. So when they put these projects together, they looked over at the forest carbon space and went, okay, well, they're getting $3 or $4 a ton, let's try for 5. And what they didn't look at was how much it actually cost them to get those projects up and running in the first place, because that was covered by philanthropy. And what that did was create an artificially low starting point for blue carbon credit prices. And that's something which has persisted now. Although prices are increasing and we're building more recognition of the work that goes into these projects, and we're building more recognition of all the different benefits they have to people that work with them, to fisheries, to coastal protection, all these different elements, there's still this fundamental starting point where we started too low. And trying to get that price point up so that more projects can break even without having to go and fundraise to fill that gap, that's something we're still working towards. And that's a real big global challenge for all of us, I think. Steve, I can see you looking very intently. I don't know if you want to comment. No? Cool, thanks. On that note, I'm going to hand over. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll see you all later. Thank you.
Agradecemos al señor Beeston por su intervención.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beeston.
Vamos a tener el honor de contar con una
Now we have the honor of welcoming a very special guest, a community leader with years of pioneering work in mangroves and community organizations.
Les pido que por favor pongan toda
Please
su atención al mensaje
pay
de
very
María
close
Ester
attention
Priolò
to the
de la
message of
Asociación
María Ester Priolò Diaz from the ASOMAUSAN
miembro de la comunidad de
Association
manglares.
and a
Ella nos
member of a
envió
mangrove
un
community.
saludo
She
a través de un
sent
video.
us
Vamos
her
a escucharlo ahora.
comments in this video clip. I'm a secretary of the Mangrove Association in the municipality of San Antero in the department of Córdoba. My relationship with the mangrove dates back in time because my father worked with the mangrove. My husband also works in the mangrove. My son also works in the mangrove. And now I belong to this beautiful association. I'm proud of being part of this mangrove family because we consider ourselves here a family. We have 7 associations of mangrove workers, and the experience has been beautiful because it's been the tradition from our ancestors when they used the mangrove, but as time went by, they started to come together and form these associations. And today we have 7 of these associations. We're all connected, and we are now using the mangrove sustainably because in our country, Colombia, in the department of Córdoba, we are the only municipality doing sustainable utilization of a mangrove. We also have a program implemented by the Mangrove Life program. The objective of this program is to avoid emissions by 1 million CO2 tons over a 30-year period through actions that protect the mangrove and the protected area of the Cispata Bay. So we work with Conservation International and CBS, INVEMAR, and other stakeholders. So we sat with them because our voices are heard. So there we planned, and all together we agreed what we were going to do. And we then went ahead with this sustainable project, and we also have promotion of non-forestry economic activities, and with that we do other activities because this forestry utilization is not permanent but temporary. So right now we are participating in an agricultural project which is planting some ancestral crops. Here we also have associations that do some ecotourism and some other associations that produce honey with local beehives. So we're very happy because we have many other alternatives to improve our quality of life. I mean, it is not perfect, but we are covering our needs, our basic needs in our communities. And the partners and the Vida Manglar project, they're not imposing anything, but we come together, have a dialogue, and then we execute. As a woman in this Vida Manglar program, I'm very happy because I feel a vital part, because this was something that I was that has been led by men historically, but today women have been empowered, especially because we have 10 women in my association, and we are empowered in our association. And now not only men are doing the mangrove work, but also women are doing work with the mangrove. We work with the community nurture sites. We help in restoring the ecosystem and rehabilitating the ecosystem. We know how to do this, how to plant and how to do this monticule. So all that we do it, women. And this is why I'm saying, because we are family, because we also have our youth involved. We encourage them to do the job, because this is how we are going to pass it down to our next generations, so that they also learn the value and the respect for our mangrove ecosystem. I'm very happy because we've been blessed with this mangrove forest. We have 5 species. We have Rhizophora mangle, Avicennia hermina, Muscularia racemosa, Campus erectus, and Pelluceria rhizophorae. And I'm very happy because I've learned a lot, and I want to continue moving forward, and everything that I can learn from here on, I'll be there to profit from this.
Qué bello ese mensaje de la
What
señora
a
Díaz, ¿verdad?
beautiful message from Mrs. Diaz. Communities are the ones that enable these projects in the mangrove sites, and they're the main recipients of our benefits, and they should always be the main recipients of our benefits. Now we're going to have a chance for a break. We want to thank our speakers for this opening session. Before closing this technical block, we invite you, we invite the speakers to come here to have the group photo taken.
Les recordamos que si están publicando en LinkedIn,
If you're posting on LinkedIn, you can tag us as at Blue Carbon MRV.
Por favor, todos los ponentes, tanto los de ayer como los de hoy, los invitamos también a
We invite
tomarse
all
una foto
speakers, the ones from yesterday and today's,
que fueron moderadores.
including moderators. We want to take a group photo.
El resto de los participantes pueden ir pasando a la zona de café.
All the attendees can now
Desean.
pass to the back of the room for our coffee break. Our volunteers will be there
En caso de que sea necesario,
to assist
que lo
you
requieran.
with any questions or requirements you may have.
Para los demás participantes, nos vemos en 15 minutos para
We will
volver con
reconvene
el
after
espacio de
this break
oportunidades de financiamiento
for
para
next
el
session of
Guyana
financing opportunities for blue carbon,
Disfruten del
which begins in
receso.
15 minutes. Enjoy your break.